let's get started. Um, I want to welcome everybody. First Beverly from ARC, who's agreed to talk with us today, and I also want to welcome all the members who are coming here to learn about the challenges of persons who have developmental disabilities in our community. They are part of our community, an important part, and we need to uh, know what their difficulties are and how we might be able to help them. Um, so this is it. As Beverly mentioned, this is a holiday. It's President's Day. So happy Presidents to anyone who is a president of anything. It's a tough job. Um, so with that, I'm going to introduce Beverly briefly. She's the executive director of ARC, also has lived experience. She has two adult children with developmental disabilities. So she knows what she talks about, what she speaks. She knows the challenges. Um, so I will let her describe just what ARC is and what it does and all the details because she knows far more about it than I do. So with this, if you want to, with that, if you want to start, Beverly.
There we go. Certainly, certainly. Thank you all for welcoming me. As Courtney said, I am Beverly Porter, and as much as I've been executive director at the ARC for 14 years, I consider myself in my roles, all of the roles I have in community, which as a parent and a spouse and a neighbor and a voter. So all of those are really important to me to be involved and informed and as aware as I can be. And a little bit about my story helps to understand developmental disabilities as well. And that is when my oldest started elementary school, we had struggled with daycare or preschool. We'd never found any sort of childcare that would fit her needs and had challenges with that, just with how she spoke and how she didn't speak, and her sensory concerns and challenges that happen with that. So nobody ever gave us a diagnosis, though. We tried going to different physicians and checking in with, even worked with a mental health therapist on some behaviors and our parenting skills. And it wasn't until my daughter was in kindergarten that teachers started telling me that I should go to the ARC and get an advocate, a school advocate. I thought I was doing pretty well. I have a background in social work, and I've worked in reproductive health and I've worked in mental health. And so I felt like I was doing a pretty good job. But I called the ARC and said, all these teachers are telling me I need an advocate. And the response that I got was, we're having a training. So I went to a volunteer training and got 12 hours of training in special education advocacy. So I didn't get an advocate, I became one. And in that context as well, was able to meet other dads and moms and hear about their children and the struggles that they had, whether it was early intervention services and birth to three or school district issues, looking at employment and what does it look like when the bus stops coming. And that's when I really connected and became part of that community, which is a legacy of parents who are being led down some challenging paths and giving one another support through all of this. So the ARC has about 200 members here in Whatcom County, and anybody can be a member. But we are absolutely devoted to and committed to improving and increasing the quality of life of people with developmental disabilities, of assuring their inclusion and helping families to be able to have the skills and the places to go and navigate to that can support them as a family. Because so many individuals with developmental disabilities continue living with their parents for sometimes decades after high school. So I'm going to go ahead and find my little slideshow thing so I can share some pieces as well. And that should work. There we go. Okay. So can you see? Oh, it's very small. I was going to give a few definition pieces. Many of you may know what a developmental disability is, but many of us have not had any other experience with that. I had friends in school who had cerebral palsy. I had a neighbor who had a brother with autism who was non-speaking. And then certainly there's also intellectual disabilities or cognitive disabilities that you would see with Down syndrome, even with fetal alcohol syndrome. Um, and there's even times where something like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has such significant symptoms and challenges for a person that that would be considered a developmental disability. Basically, something that starts early enough in life or before the age of 18 that is going to impact our learning, our communication, our ability to just be a part of a family, and learn self-help skills, learn the skills that children learn about potty training and using their fork and leaving something on the floor that fell instead of eating it. So all of those parts of growing and learning as a child are impacted by a developmental disability. Certainly the most frequent diagnosis or common diagnosis that we know about within developmental disabilities are that intellectual disability and autism. And autism is quite prevalent. And many people within pediatrics and across the world are becoming more familiar with autism, also in girls, because that can look different. So that is part of what we are working with. And I thought this slideshow was going to work. It didn't. So I'm going to find my next screen. Thanks for your patience. So this is a little bit about Whatcom County, folks. We can see that we find a lot of, there's a lot of children who are eligible for developmental disabilities and are young. So in birth to 3, we have the greatest number of people with developmental disabilities. And you can see here about 3,500 people do have developmental disabilities, but only about 2,000 of those are actually enrolled with the Developmental Disability Administration. And that is a department of or a section of DSHS that has services specific for children and adults with developmental disabilities. So they really look at, DDA looks at, the Developmental Disability Administration looks at birth to 3 very specifically in that early intervention service. And any child who may be getting something even like just speech therapy or working on some physical therapy is actually enrolled and is a client of developmental disability. But as this shows here, there are 256 people out of all of those 2,000 who have no paid services whatsoever. Being eligible for DDA doesn't mean that you get services, that you have supports for personal care services, assistance at school, anything like that. So, where did 3 go? Oh, there we go. So here in Whatcom County, we've got some services built up to try to be helpful and supportive for families. And some of those are specifically through state dollars and federal dollars. And when I look at this chart of thinking about supporting people with developmental disabilities, it also includes that piece that we do need to have support for families. About 25% of parents, when they have a child with developmental disability, need to quit their job completely. And so a two-income family can become a one-income family, that there are not supports, there are not inclusive childcare facilities, and there aren't programs as well for children who are older. Let's say you've got a 9-year-old and you want to enroll them in some taekwondo classes at the school or something like that. And after school activities are not necessarily accessible for them, which means that a parent may be able to work for part of the school day, but then needs to be available to their family member afterwards. So it has a huge impact on the family financially as well. And the other circle there of building communities, which is part of why we're here today too, is learning more about developmental disabilities and what it looks like for those folks in our community and how we can support them. So the ARC receives funding for supporting families and individuals through all of these opportunities of connecting with families in that early intervention and dealing with their emotional support and their emotional needs of having a child. Becoming a parent is a lot of work. It's a huge change and disruption to um, anything you thought parenting may be. And then having a child with special health care needs, with the developmental disabilities, can all be also be very challenging. So families can call the ARC and get a helping parent match. They get connected to one other parent with a similar diagnosis of a child, maybe a couple of years older, and we have 95 trained advocates of parents with a wide variety of developmental disabilities to be able to support families. And parent to parent and that helping parent match is actually an evidence-based process. Research has shown through the United States that having parents be able to be connected to another person within 48 hours, um, which is what we do, um, that is a huge relief of stress, helps the family feel less isolated and insulated from the world, and helps that family then and that parent be able to manage some of those other challenges that they do have to face every day. So that's one of the important things we do that I can throw out, as an evidence-based practice. And because of that, because there are parent to parents in every county in Washington state and quite a few across the United States, if somebody has a very rare diagnosis and we can't find somebody here in Whatcom County, we go on to our state system and check with other coordinators throughout the state. And then sometimes have to go beyond Washington state, but that's very rare. So somebody knows that there is another dad or mom here in Whatcom County with the same thing, and we might not have answered all the questions or relieved all their worries, but they don't feel alone anymore. And so that support to families is part of what builds that family resilience as well, in having, yeah, having that very close connection. So there's a lot more to that, but I don't want to just do statistics. I'm going to show you as well the I had some Whatcom County info here that was, there we go. This is what I was going to show you. And this has to do with within Whatcom County. As I said, Birth to 3 has some really good programs and connection in that early intervention age of having a child there. So we have play groups and we go into other therapy settings to be able to connect with families. And in the school years, we do a lot of trainings and information and workshops on how special education works, how to work with your school team, um, ways to really promote the learning and the opportunity for that child to be in general education when they can be, and gaining skills within that. The difficulty that many of us see is that after 18, 21, when a student does graduate from high school, that suddenly we've lost 30 hours a week of support as a family. And so as you can see from this, we have 56% of the folks live with a parent, and there are 17% of the people here in Whatcom County who actually live in their own home, which is really remarkable. That means, though, that they may have supported living, they may have residential support or personal care providers who come to their home to be able to assist them with eating, hygiene, bathing, meal preparation, going shopping for groceries, that sort of thing. So there's still, as you can see, a large um, expectation of the family to continue to provide those services throughout somebody's life. And what I've been able to do, our family's been able to do, is when my oldest became uh, 18, they began to get Social Security, and we could actually charge them rent. And this is a strategy for some families that actually, if the parent can't work, it still is some income, but those dollars are for the food and shelter of your family member. Because we're in a position as homeowners, we saved those dollars for several years and bought a tiny home. And so now my daughter lives just 20 feet from me in her own little tiny home where she has dignity and privacy and her own mess. And I still make her meals and help with hygiene and those sorts of things, but has more of an adult life to be able to choose when she eats and what she wears and all of those things. So that kind of opens up into this whole area of what is available for resources for those folks with developmental disabilities and for parents and families and the service providers around them. Um, so there are folks who are employed, and there are what they call supported employment agencies throughout the county, Colson Supported Employment, Cascade Connections, you might have heard. So they assist individuals with disabilities to look for and find and get a job. And then they become a job coach and they stay connected to that individual. So I know one, I was going to call him a young man, but he's 20 years older than he used to be. Um, I know Scott, who works at Hagen's, and he does what they call facing of all the beverages in the alcohol and pop and whatever section. And he's quite independent, rides a bike to work and back, doesn't need assistance with transportation. And so he goes to work weekly, and his job coach in terms of helped him train him and talk about any difficulties. So his job coach checks in once a week with Scott and asks him how things are, if there's any problems. And then they also check in with Scott's supervisor. So that can be a very limited role as a job coach, or it can be really an intensive role as a job coach. There's a cafe in Blaine where there's a man who is deaf and blind, but he sits near the front door and people come in and say hello to him. He has some hearing, but not that good. So, but people do say hello to him. And he sits with his job coach and he's taking a sticker from his job coach that's the name of that coffee company and placing it on the cups. And so he's having some assistance to do a job. So not only is he making some money and being supported in that, everybody who comes into that coffee shop sees him and knows that he's performing a task that is contributing, that is participating. And taxes come out of his paycheck. So of the 300 plus people who are working here in Whatcom County, those dollars are part of our taxes that are shared throughout the community, throughout Whatcom County and throughout the state. So, but that's a small number of folks who are working. And many of those folks with developmental disabilities may only be working 30 minutes to 2 hours a week, sometimes 4 hours a week. So that's very limited. And that means you've got 38 more hours to fill. And what do you fill that with? That's where our work and many other folks' work in community inclusion, being able to involve children and adults with disabilities in typical environments and know that they are cared for and supported. So, um, Courtney had mentioned the Max Higby Center, which is a recreation program here in Bellingham. They're looking to start a branch in Linden, which is amazing um, because families are really worried about putting their kid on a bus to Bellingham. So I know families who are like, I will never put my son or daughter on a bus because of safety concerns. And if you have a young adult who is non-speaking, that you know is not going to be able to advocate for themselves or get their needs met if they're lost or confused, I can understand that concern. So having a program like Max Higby means uh, that your family member can be cared for and supported in some ways, and trying to do this in a way that isn't segregating from the community. So that's a program. There are a couple other recreation programs too, but the Max Higby program tries to go out on walks. They have some groups that actually go over to the YMCA and work out on a regular basis. And so again, people in the community are seeing that folks with disabilities can participate and connect and be a part of the typical activities of any other human here. Um, and so that's a beautiful way that Max Higme is able to help and support folks in that. The challenge for many of us as parents is that there are some requirements for Max Higby. Max Higby Center is not authorized to provide personal care. So if your family member is incontinent, are wearing a diaper or a pull-up, or needs assistance with the bathroom, the staff there are not able to provide that support. So it does limit who can actually access the program. And this is not a criticism of the program, but it is a really good example of what those people have experienced through life. That I could sign a kid up for at age 5 for martial arts class, and the expectation is that all those children are toilet trained and that instructor doesn't have to provide any support for toileting. And if that doesn't work, then my student can't be there. Um, so that happens with a lot of preschools as well. It happens in school programs. It can even happen at the YMCA. And nobody's trying to be selective or exclusive, but it does become a barrier that somebody's disability keeps them from being able to be involved in typical activities. So that's the other part of what many folks in the community, the ARC is, but also like the Healthy Children's Fund. I've been participating with some of that group in terms of the funding that's going out and really focusing on the piece that child care centers have a resource. If a child with autism who's 5 years old is coming for an after-school program and that child needs toileting assistance and maybe is using an iPad for communication and may have some behaviors, I want that childcare facility to be able to get the training and the support that they want, that then Thomas can be there with his other 5-year-old peers, instead of dad or mom needing to leave their job early or quit their job or whatever that may be. And so wanting to help improve this piece of community connection and inclusion of what can feel like an atypical need from a child care provider, that we as a community can provide some resources for them to be able to handle it and to know that they can be successful in inclusion as well. Um, so there are some other recreation programs. There's something called the Arrow Project, again for adults and teens. They're working doing some things down at the community boating center. For the last 2 years, I believe, they have had a ski to sea team. And so, and have participated just the same as any other team, but an adaptive team where one person may have used a sit ski, um, that somebody with visual impairments had a guide with them as they were running, to support them, to not run for them or carry them, but just to make sure that they knew what the route was and how to get there. So there have been some remarkable people who recognize that we all belong in community and that some of these pieces about who we are as a person with disability shouldn't exclude us. Um, and I think that's that bigger picture about disability and about inclusion. And I can still use that word. um, and diversity and equity as well. But that piece that everyone has different needs, different access needs. And it could be that you've just had knee surgery. And so when you go to the Mount Baker Theater, you're not navigating the stairs up to the balcony or that you may have had some surgery and are wearing an eye patch and recognize, I can't drive right now. I need to take the bus. It's not a problem. We all belong here. And and we can get our different access needs met in different ways. You may see a lot of people wearing headphones and think, how come all these kids are walking around blocking out the world or only looking at their phone? And it may be somebody that the only way they can get from point A to point B is to get through the chaos of the noise on the bus, the activity down on Railroad Avenue, whatever that may be. And this is part of their armor, their protection to be able to navigate some of those circumstances. So it's easy to look sometimes and think, oh, all the kids are on their phones and they're all blocking out the world. And many of them may be doing that in order to be able to be in this world, in order to be able to be living in the community as any other individual may be. Um, so those are some of the immediate resources for families and for adults with developmental disabilities. There are also some small little pop it in time kind of things. One of the opportunities that does exist in the community is the Lions Camp Horizon up at Birch Bay. And they do, in the summer, they do some weekly camps so that individuals with disabilities can be there and be supported and have a camp experience like so many other children and adults may want to have. And so the Lions Club, this is Western Washington and British Columbia. They all work and volunteer together on that. And I know that there are other folks who've gone and volunteered and participated too. The costume room alone at Camp Horizon is impressive. There's a bowling alley. They've brought horses in and done horseback riding with people who parents never would have taken that chance. And so people get an opportunity with Camp Horizon to be able to just take a risk and have the choice of taking that risk and some dignity in that instead of a mom or dad saying, no, you can't do that. We can all be that way about our children, I know, of, oh, they'll never do that. But in another context, they go and surprise us and build up our respect about their skills and what challenges that they are able to meet. Also, the other once a year activity is called Camp Team, and it is a joint project between Bellingham Parks and Recreation Department and then the recreation program up at Western. All of the folks who are getting a degree in recreation have to have a quarter where they've worked with people with developmental disabilities and other disabilities to define develop programs that are accessible because specialized recreation can need some additional specialized support, but is the same recreation as everyone else doing it. So camp team, they've done things like canoeing. Um, and I know someone who has cerebral palsy who's not able to walk or stand, but she has been in a canoe every year when she goes. And it is the thrill of her year because there's so many other contexts where someone would say, well, our lawyer said you can't do that. You know, we need only able-bodied people who can self-rescue to be able to do this task. And so Terry has the opportunity and the dignity to take some risks and and to be part of something where she feels competent as well. So that's one of the other little things that happens during the year. But you can see from, I guess, the resources and the opportunities, those ones are really rich and meaningful opportunities for folks. So I know I kind of give you a lot of little details here in the bigger picture, but I would love to hear some questions or have a conversation about other other pieces of what that looks like in Whatcom County or what we're concerned about maybe coming up with Medicaid and Social Security. All of those pieces impact all of us.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay. Oh,
Hmm.
yeah, Sherry.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah.
Beverly, thank you. That was really a good
Oh,
presentation.
oh,
And
thank you.
I was concerned about your funding for
Oh,
that's coming up in the next few years.
right.
And
Yes.
I assume it's at risk with, because it's all mostly through the federal government that you're funded.
Well, no, that is a great question, Sherry. So the what's happening federally is terrifying for families and individuals because it does impact Social Security for folks with disabilities and folks who are seniors. Um, but what it doesn't affect is it doesn't affect our dollars. Right now, the state of Washington and Whatcom County they do divert some dollars specifically to what they call information and education. And so dollars are funneled to us through the health department. So our ARC programs are those helping parents, going to IEP special education meetings with families, doing trainings and workshops, helping families fill out applications for insurance and other things. So we feel pretty solid right now, and that's good. And we've had that relationship with the health department since 1998, and I've been involved in it since 2001. So there's trust and there's an understanding that parents deserve one another and support in that way. That, yeah, like as Courtney had said, with the lived experience, you can ask a second grade teacher something and they don't have the knowledge, and that's okay. And if I don't, I have a colleague who does, and we want to make sure people get accurate information as well. So that biggest concern right now is individually what this will mean for families.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Julia.
Hello. My question was similar to Sherry's in that now over many years, I've taken donations to the ARC or Value Village.
Mhm.
And I don't know, is that connected to your programs? Is that how much of that funding do you actually receive? Which is why I've always been under my understanding has been I'm bringing this here because I want to support these programs. Is that really
Right.
true? And how much of that do you get if it is true?
Yeah. That was true about 10 years ago. The funding dwindled. So the state ARC, we have a state chapter that does a lot of advocacy in Olympia, and they had set up that whole truck pickup donation contract with Value Village. And so it was fruitful for a few years, and we had 12 to 15,000 that we got through the early 2000s. And I think since 2008 or 9, we weren't getting any more. The dollars that they made were paying for the gas and insurance and staff and trucks. So the state ARC would parcel out proteins to different chapters in different counties based on where they got those donations. And 3 months into COVID lockdown, Savers canceled all the contract. Value Village did. They canceled all of the contract. So we've not gotten any don't have any relationship with them. If you do go to Value Village, the photos that you see up front of people with developmental disabilities are folks in Seattle. Value Village is contracted with Northwest Centers, and they do birth to 3 programs for early intervention, and they have some employment programs for adults. So your dollars aren't staying here in Whatcom County anymore. Yeah. So it was very fruitful for several years to be able to have that, and it's been over 15 years now that anything came from that. Basically, I write grants and we get contracts, and that is how we've been able to maintain our programs over the years. But thanks for thinking of us and hoping that the money was getting to somebody too. I don't.
I think a lot of people still think that and
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know that what you've just explained and because I remember seeing the trucks that had the ARC logo on it and so forth, and used them myself several times. But
Right.
so it's interesting. Because I think there's still that perspective that people
Right.
and that's why people go there over maybe Habitat or some of these other places, because
Right.
they're doing a greater good maybe. So that might be helpful. I wish the word could get out more that
Yeah.
there's a misunderstanding maybe amongst the community. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that piece too is that Savers and Value Villages are for profit, and not everybody knows that as well. And just because the words may have changed on the Value Village, windows, the pictures still represent people with disabilities. So it's really easy to have that assumption. We did do a little bit of marketing trying to get some information out about that. But I even got an email last week from somebody who has a whole bunch of furniture to donate. So we still get the phone calls and the emails. Yes. Yeah. And so we actually then have a list at the office so we can tell people other places where they can donate that are Whatcom County specific. Yeah. Hi, Sherry.
Beverly is Goodwill local. I mean, which organization is better for us to donate to if we want to keep the funds in Whatcom County? Is there one?
I'm not sure about the Goodwill. I know that they're associated with what they call Evergreen Goodwill, which I think is a conglomeration of Goodwills. I do know that the Goodwill here in Bellingham is also a partner through United Way. And so I do believe that many of the dollars do stay here. We're a United Way partner. That means every year the board of directors looks over our financial sheets and our tax return, and I have to give them information on the numbers of families we supported and events and that sort of thing. So I love that kind of oversight, and it helps me feel confident about Goodwill and other agencies to know that they're willing to go through that process, and if there are critiques, to work on those as well. Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Because we're talking about funding. I know the state and probably the federal government does 2 types of funding. There's one kind where if somebody has a need, they qualify for a program, they get the funding. There's
Right.
another where the person may qualify for the funding, but there's a limit on the legislature puts a limit on the amount of funds available. And once the funds are gone, they're gone. And so there are
Then they're
many
gone.
people who are eligible who do not get the service. What are you seeing in terms of disability? Which approaches are they taking, and what are the
Yeah.
problems there?
Yeah, so statewide, the difficulty with funding, and how the Developmental Disability Administration deals with that is there are people who are eligible to be a client. They meet all of the diagnostic standards, but we don't have enough money and the capacity to serve all of them, which is why there are almost 300 people in Whatcom County who don't have personal care services, who don't have employment services, who don't have any therapy services, et cetera. So that the funding cap or the limitation of funding keeps people from being able to get supports. There are some children who will get moved immediately into I think it's a complex medical care. There's a category.
Yeah.
And so let's say a child comes home who has a feeding tube and a tracheotomy and is blind, et cetera, et cetera. Because of their nursing care needs, then they receive additional funding and support. I know, though, there are some people in Whatcom County who have that and who cannot find nurses. So the other gaps, or the other capacity piece we run into is there's not enough childcare places that'll take children. There's not enough nurses aides who will become personal care providers, and there are not enough nurses, LPNs and RNs who are, the workforce is incredibly limited. So if any of you were trying to find childcare when you had younger kids, it's doubly or triply hard to find that kind of support for an adult. So
No,
yeah,
oh,
it's tricky. There's not services.
I know when I was in North Carolina advising parents about what to do, if a child had some disability, even though the parent felt that they did not need help at this point,
Right.
the advice was get on the list, get on the wait
Yes.
list, because it's going to be a 5 or 6 year wait before you are eligible. So
Yes.
that time
Yeah.
you may really need it. Get on the list as
Yes.
soon as
Yeah.
you can qualify.
That's right. And there are many families, I meet some families in the community. I lived near Linden. I went to Meridian, and I understand some of the cultural and social pieces about family pride and connection, and that families are like, we're going to take care of Jonathan forever, and that's great, but we don't know what Jonathan needs, and if you can't take care of him, we're going to need some advance warning. So I work with families about that, and that's challenging, but it's helpful because the state could forecast and say, we know that this year there will be X number of students with disability who are leaving high school and will need adult services. And we could plan for that, but we don't. And that comes down to the legislature, and the fact that developmental disabilities are about 1 to 2% of the population. So we're not top of the list, and it's not always flashy and glitzy and all the sexy things that people want to use to advertise to get some attention about. So I'm absolutely with you about get your family member eligible and within a system so that we can plan for that. I if I didn't have my daughter connected with DDA services, when I pass away, everyone else is going to go, well, what the heck do we do? We didn't know. So now we have an annual assessment every year about her specific needs around toileting and showering and food. I even have, I've made a I made a notebook, a visual recipe notebook. I have a friend who will come and spend a day or two here and take care of things so I could run off with my husband. And she can show up and make meals that my daughter will eat because she won't eat, whatever. And she deserves that. She deserves that choice as a 32-year-old to be able to say, no, I don't want your spaghetti. I want lasagna. And she won't eat your spaghetti. So what happens with that assessment every year is I'm continuing to be able to really declare accurately, this is what her needs are. And if anybody else had to walk in the door and take care of her, they would know what to do and not to do. And so that piece of having, I think, a government legacy that accounts for their needs is incredibly important. Yeah.
Well, that relates to one of the things I was wondering about, uh, as people get older and their children, and they then begin to wonder who's going to take care of my child after I'm gone. What's available to them? What help is available to them?
Yeah. There's a couple different housing kind of options or residential supports. And so if I guess the simplest, easiest one is adult family homes. And there are adult family homes that are set up throughout Whatcom County. Many of them are for folks who are aging or who may have dementia. But there are some that are specific to people with developmental disabilities. So that is, I think, one of the easiest options in terms of it's cheaper funding wise. So it could be that case managers are a little more, excuse me, I have a tickle. Case managers are a little more willing and able to go out and help with that sort of thing. And thinking about where is your family member going to live when you're no longer with us.
Are
There's
there enough
also,
of them?
no, there are
Okay.
not enough of them. Yeah. There are none outside of city limits. There used to be some more in Linden, and people have gone out of business. So one of the things that has happened, the city of Bellingham had some grants a couple years ago to anyone who owned their home, who wanted to start a child care or an adult family home. And so that was some additional funding. And the tricky piece about an adult family home is that that individual can't have any overnight care. So if somebody's needs are that they need to be toileted during the night or have medication or something else, the care is provided basically like, 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. But there's not a wake night staff in an adult family home. So this is folks who have, I guess, a lower level of support needs who can live there. In supported living, there's something called supported living, and that's one of those pieces I, I shared that the legislature only approves X number of slots, X number of openings for supported living. And supported living can be up to 24/7 care. It could be awake night staff. And so Cascade Connections is one of the agencies here in Whatcom County that does employment support and supported living. And they've actually accepted some people who were wanting to leave state institutions and move back to their community. So it's really remarkable seeing how much concern and care and support that they've offered in that way. And it gets challenging when you have somebody who may be non-speaking. I think any teenager is more difficult than an adult. So getting through those teenage years is challenging. And especially if there isn't language, if there isn't an ability to, express your frustration and anger or sadness, it sticks with you. So there's a lot of families who seek some sort of support in those last couple of years of high school. 16 to 21 is bumpy. And then it gets better. And I see that as well. So the state has said that nobody under the age of 18 can be institutionalized. So they've come up with some kind of temporary sort of things through the state where someone could have some stabilization services, similar to somebody having a, like a 72-hour lockdown for mental health, that they could take somebody in for a couple weeks at a state facility and try to, modulate the medications, try to learn more about this individual to support them. And then often, because somebody has sought out some of these unique and even more intensive services, it may be easier to move them into supported living and that higher level of paid care. The challenge with supported living is pay. The legislature decides how much those certified nursing assistants and healthcare aides make. And it has not kept up with cost of living adjustments or other concerns. So the turnover is tremendous. I know Skagit County has had a lot more difficulty with some of their adult family homes and supported living. And there are staff who English is not their first language. They've come here to work and are hard workers, but the ability of somebody who is from the Sudan to be able to acclimate to this culture and climate and try to understand a non-speaking adult is, yeah, that's just something that's hard for me to know how I could support that. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. So the difficulty with some of the housing pieces and those supports is trying to find staff and then keep them.
Is
Mary Lynn,
immigration, are
Oh.
immigration issues going to affect this, the staffing?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it will. Yeah.
Mary Lynn,
I
I
think-
don't know how to raise my hand. This is Mickey.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Hi,
sorry. I
Mickey.
should be looking over here. Anyways, go
But
ahead, Mickey.
Anyway, I don't really have a question, but first, Beverly, great presentation. But going back to what Sherry, she mentioned goodwill. And, one thing that I wanted to throw into the mix here is that the goodwill does, and I don't know if this would pertain to the ARC in any way, but, the goodwill here in Bellingham provides, free job training and educational programs, including getting the GED, and they help
Yes.
with, as I said, job training, and they consult with people on how to do a resume and whatnot. So when I donate to the Goodwill, I feel very confident that the funds or the goods will be used well. But on
Yes.
another matter, when Value Village came up, and then the misperception and misunderstanding about how that organization is for profit, I wanted to mention, in case Beverly, you don't know about this, and maybe other members here don't know, but Cascadia Daily News will have a dedicated health and healthcare reporter on staff by July, and they intend to have ongoing stories yeah, about various topics. And I think that maybe it might be advisable for you to get your dibs in for an early story about what you're doing, and just bring some of these misunderstandings to the forefront. Not to
Mhm.
do a number on Value Village necessarily, but
Right.
I I personally feel like they're a little nefarious. I think. I mean, because I thought for years that they were, not for profit.
Mhm.
But anyway, mainly, I just wanted to call attention to the fact that CDN will have a dedicated health reporter by July.
Oh, Thanks, Mickey. That's really great to know. I will, I'm going to follow up on that for sure. And I also appreciate you talking a little bit more about what Goodwill does, because it's not just the clothing and then the sales out of the storefront. They do an amazing amount of job training. And one of the pieces that I didn't talk about is that there are a tremendous amount of people in the community with mental health concerns and with fetal alcohol. And it is incredibly difficult to diagnose fetal alcohol effects. I am really certain that there are so many people who are homeless, who have been fired from work, who have not been able to maintain housing, have had unbeknownst to them, an impact on their life and their learning because of alcohol. And that we didn't identify that when they were in those school years. We looked at a child who was Black or brown, or we looked at a family that we thought, well, sure, they're not, it's not a race issue, but this is a family in poverty that doesn't have experience with parenting, etc., and blame things on that kid rather than offering some opportunities. And so what Goodwill is doing is really great. I I am certain that there are hundreds and thousands and millions of people in the US who have fetal alcohol effects, who we are not compassionate and understanding about. And that if we were to offer the services by even doing some assessments and evaluations, we would learn to understand them more and the challenges that they're facing. They don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I think I'm going to get fired from my job and lose my housing. So having Goodwill as another place to go, especially when there are folks who have no idea and don't identify as somebody with a disability. Yeah.
I just want to say, Beverly, I don't know how you do it because it's incredibly challenging, and I say this with all greatest sincerity, to work in these kind of services when all the odds are repeatedly against you. So for you to have been doing this for 14 years is more than admirable, and I hope that you're getting the support you need in your own life to continue. But I thank you for sharing a lot of information today. So very
Yeah.
grateful for what you do.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I mean, I can say that my kids have taught me so much, and I've only been executive director for 14 years. I've been there for 22. And that piece of coming from a background of medical care and social work, I know for me, I want people to feel empowered. I want them to understand who they are and how to navigate these systems. And it's tricky. It's the same as someone going down and working with the planning department to try to get a permit to put a shed on their roof. There's bureaucracy and paperwork and hoops that you have to jump through. And each of them can feel like this little tiny cut that you just keep getting. So all of our staff are parents or grandparents of someone with a disability. And our board requires that at least 2 members are self-advocates in the community, are people with developmental disabilities. So that's the piece that I feel keeps us honest and doing the right work. Yeah. And I can also tell you that we could use people on our board. So if you do have some interest in that, you can certainly email me and I'll connect you with folks. One of the things, because it's an isolated community in some ways, all the people who are on the board are connected in some way. And it would be really nice to have folks who don't know about developmental disabilities, but do know how to be a board member, that do know how to work with others and govern and expect that the nonprofit that you're supporting is going to do well. Hi, Sherry. Oh, mute.
And I'm muted again. Um, how many members are on your board? And I was gonna ask you, we're in the Meridian District and
Oh,
my kids went to school there and whatnot. And I'm wondering what your maiden name was.
it actually, I didn't change my name when I married.
Okay.
Because I was already in social work and in medical care with a license, and I just decided not to. So yeah, I graduated in 82.
Okay.
And that is one of the things that
Great.
makes it really, really easy for me to go. I go and visit every high school in the community and work with parents. And to be able to say I went to Meridian just breaks a bunch of other barriers too, because
Mhm.
Bellingham has everything and Maple Valley doesn't, or Maple Falls doesn't, or Sumas doesn't. So I get that piece. Yeah. Um,
So,
I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, so that new skills center that's going in out at
Yes.
Meridian, I
Yes.
certainly hope the funding is still coming through for that. And they will be designating a lot of resources to people that need the help, won't they?
Yes, yes, they
I
will
hope.
be. Yeah, and this is something Meridian School District is working on, is basically an early childhood education kind of setup. And so, yeah, being inclusive to children with all sorts of needs, and then training those staff and those students to understand, oh, I'm working in this context and I have so many skills because now I've worked with 4 kids with autism and this little boy with Down syndrome, and they have the confidence to know that it's just people. So yeah. Um, what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, what was the first question? I don't remember.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, I forget too.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, if you remember, shout it out. I'm sorry. Oh,
Did you,
Well, I know there's some legislation
mhm,
before the House and the Senate, the state
mhm,
legislature,
mhm.
regarding that they impact this. One is there's a bill to extend the ability of people with disabilities to attend school until they're 22, and actually they can finish the school year once they're,
Yes,
even if their, say their birthday is in February, they can go to the end
right,
of the year when they turn
right.
22. Um, I I'm not following that bill particularly. I don't know just what's happening with it,
Okay.
but it's there. There was another bill that was going to um, uh, give funds to parents for children with severe disabilities.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure where that is. If anyone is interested in that, I can find out where these bills are and what's going on with them.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you're aware of?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the one piece that did pass already or was passed because of a case, a legal case, that going to school till age 22 is legally happening. And so that information's been sent out to all the school districts in the community. And I think it's made a difference that, you can graduate at age 18, but if you still have a disability and you have some special needs, they have something called community transitions that covers that 18 to 21, or now 18 to 22. And I think part of the reason that was pushed in is there's even some states that have special education services available till somebody's 26. Um, so it's a piece of recognizing that we're lifelong learners, and that what you've done to meet maybe the academic or specialized academic things to graduate still hasn't taught you how to ride the bus around, go and grocery shopping with 6 other students and 2 teachers, navigating the community and those processes in a safe way with others and building the skill. The one about parents, once a child has turned 18, a parent can be a paid care provider for their family member. I am a paid care provider for my daughter as well, which helped us buy that tiny house. So, um, so it does become a source of income for some families. And if you work more than 80 hours a month, there is health care insurance through the union. So there's some families who they are surviving on being a paid care provider and knowing that Social Security is coming in and that they can still work a part-time job and maintain their life. I don't want anybody to get locked into that. and never find some other opportunities for their family member as well. I want my daughter to know other people can support her, not just me. So that's part of that. So for anyone who's 17 and younger, the challenge that has been brought forward by many families is, like I said about that one parent with twins, there's no nursing care. She's at it 24/7. And it's because she can't find other nursing care, it would be great for her to be able to be paid for some of that care because she also can't go to work. Um, and so that bill that's being pushed through the legislature would, at a very limited level, allow some parents of medically complex kids to be paid for the personal care. You can have a 7-year-old who's an eligible client of DDA, and that 7-year-old may have been assessed for 48 hours of personal care assistance because they need help with showering and toileting and getting dressed and some of these other things. So it could be that there's 12 hours a week that are available for that family, and they can't find somebody to come do it. I need someone to show up for an hour on weekdays to help my kid get ready for school. And so they come up and they do that hour and then they skip over to another family. There just isn't staff. There are not enough trained folks who can take on that roles. So what happens is the state of Washington saves all that money. They have this 7-year-old that they could be paying, a couple $100 a month to somebody to provide that care, and they're saving it. So just even thinking about the legislature saying, yes, we'll do this, is also a recognition that we're gonna spend those dollars. And those children are all entitled. That's an entitlement. They're entitled to that kind of support. It's the same as if my Aunt Joanne has a stroke and needs help with her personal care, with toileting and meal preparation and bathing. That's the same thing. And my Aunt Joanne's going to get help because there is enough staff in terms of some of the folks who are aging. I hope that wasn't too much info, Courtney. But yeah, so our state chapter works on and takes a look at all the bills that are going through and lets folks know this is a concern, this looks really great, those sorts of things. Yeah. Sherry?
I remembered my question. How large is your board? How many people are on your board?
We have 7.
7.
Well, actually, we have 8 right now. Our range is 7 to 11. We have 2 self-advocates, and we have term limits, which is great because we all can get in a rut, right? And so what it does is it provides opportunity for other people to come in. There's sometimes that we might really lean heavy on a particular self-advocate and their involvement because she's speaking and she knows how to talk about the law or whatever else, and we don't give somebody else a chance. And I think it's also good for our board to see different communication styles and to help one another learning what we're doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a great presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things I had shared before too is if they're in all of the work you're doing in terms of health issues, if I know some folks at the health department, we could come back and talk more about the child care for children with special health care needs, some of the other things that are happening with that Healthy Children's Fund. So I want to continue to be a resource with any questions or ideas that you have.
Yeah, I would be curious to know about how the Healthy Children's Fund is being used.
Yeah.
I supported that, but I still have a lot of questions about how it's being used.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think the ongoing caregiver, that has been a problem for a very, very long time. And I think, I don't know if there is anything, but until we get better pay for those individuals, then it will continue to be an ongoing problem. And I don't know, people have tried things in the legislature for many years to get particularly certified nursing assistants who are the backbone of healthcare,
Yes.
and they've been disregarded and underpaid for so long. And I just think that that's the core of all these issues here. So I don't know if there is anything actively happening current day right now, but I know things have been tried in the past.
Yeah, yeah. And I can look at it as that bigger picture, Julia, that the work of taking care of one another is not honored in a lot of ways, paid or unpaid. And so whether that's childcare or nursing care or, serving meals in a restaurant, there's some pieces about the product is service. The product is not something that I can sell out and we can mark up to the next person. Um, and that the respect and the honoring of one another as vital, I think it comes down to some of that too. Um, I do know that the state of Washington and Whatcom County have really looked at the child care issue. Um, we're about 4,000 child care slots short in Whatcom County. And I don't know if it's going to happen now or not, but last year the Department of Labor came and had a meeting with myself and some other folks from the Healthy Children's Fund. There are two multi-million-dollar projects. Sumas and Linden are getting new border crossing buildings, etc. And there's going to be a number of employees who come in from out of state or out of the area, along with employees that can happen here, and they will need childcare. And so the Department of Labor is worried about that. So yeah, I'm happy to connect with some of my folks about Healthy Children's Fund and talk more about that work. I'm keeping my foot in the door regularly to recognize that children have unique needs, and that one child care might not be the right place for them too. So one of the more recent things about childcare that I can tell you from Healthy Children's Fund that I'm excited about, they have some capital funds for some people who are building new childcare facilities. And there's there's two amazing people who've both been preschool teachers, and they are beginning to create a database of all childcare facilities in the county, so families can find a drop-in or an emergency coverage, and that information will be updated and taken care of. And anyone who runs their own childcare doesn't have the time to do that. So Healthy Children funds are going to these specific people who have computer knowledge along with what is childcare, so that I, as a parent, I find, oh, I got to stay home today because my kid, whatever that thing is, and I might be able to find a childcare slot. So I'm excited about how the dollars are being used to expand services. And, we look at the zip code of the person who's applying for funds, and oh, great, they're in Sumas. Let's say yes. That's kind of what it comes down to for me, because the needs are everywhere. But I'd love to get more info to you too.
I'm not seeing any additional questions. I don't see any hands raised so I want to wrap up by thanking you so much. You
Oh,
gave us a lot to think
you.
about, a
Yeah.
lot of information,
Great.
that well, lots of things I didn't know. So I guess I'm assuming other people didn't know either. This was wonderful. This is a great presentation. And yes, I will be in touch with you. I'd like to know more about the the childhood funding and what's going on there. So yeah, we'll talk some more.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
very
Well,
much.
thank you so much, all of you, for your questions. And I want to thank you for continuing to understand and promote involvement in voting. I'm my daughter's guardian, which means she can't do a lot of things like buy a car or purchase property, but she votes. And that was really important for both of us to retain the right to make decisions about her life with support. So thank you.
Very good. Congratulations.